Where to begin? Where do I begin?
I went out to California last week to go to the wedding of my friends Craig and Kristen. And Mike Watt played at their wedding. Mike Watt. She's in a heart attack! He was loading in right when I got there. And I was talking to somebody and I was had my ear and they were yelling into my ear and I was looking down at the ground and I saw these 2 feet come in wearing these big foamy flip-flops. And I could just tell right at that moment, that's Mike Watt. I didn't even have to look at his face. Not that I've seen his feet before. You could see it. Those are Mike Watt's feet. He could probably play the bass with them. He had a big old bucket hat on. He looked like he was coming off the set of Gilligan's Island. They got up and played, and his set was killer. He just blew me away once again. Kicked ass and just was all over this bass, and the band was great. And they did a little bit of everything. Don't remember any Firehose songs now that I think about it. But there was some of his solo stuff, and there were some covers, and there was some Minutemen stuff, some choice Minutemen stuff. They played it really well. Everybody was stoked, and he was talking in between songs. He's got this way of talking that's almost like song lyrics or beat poetry, roundabout, descriptive way. It's hard to explain.
The song is about standing in front of the classroom in your underwear. And it's only a dream. You dreamed it on purpose.
The interviews from back in the day with him and dboon and Georgehurley, Minutemen, they have this own language.
No, merch is an after-the-fact kind of thing. You look at the sales and you say, oh, this was more merch. You can't calculate and predict what's going to be the happening sound. People think they can. Sometimes they're right, but you can't tell. We just do things to show people it's alive. How do you do it, D, when you get your message across?
Well, I get my message across is because I'm able to.
What if only Minutemen sound was on the radio, and anybody else who tried echo or stuff like this couldn't get on? Would everybody try to copy the Minutemen sound again on the radio? There's a lot of con involved.
And even the lyrics. It takes some detective work to try to figure out. Look at these liner notes, the way they do it. And they do this on the Minutemen albums and Firehose albums, where it's just like this, one line of words that goes around in a design, which was really fun when you would have those albums or CDs, whatever, and you'd get the artwork out and you'd have to turn the corner, figure out what the hell's going on. This guy is a true musician, poet, artist, musical troubadour. He's a great songwriter. You never think about that. You always think, Mike Watt. He's a punk rock icon. He's the, bass
Master of the Thunderbird.
all these things. He wrote some really great songs. The first wave of punk rock came, the Velvet Underground, and then Iggy and the Stooges, and then you had this the first wave, the Ramones, the Sex Pistols, the Damned, and the Clash. They're all supposed to be these people that they don't fit the mold of the 70s prog rock bands or self-indulgent 70s bands that are
Long hair, high heels, extremely expensive guitar.
frickin' skills out the wazoo to pay the bills. And then these other guys came along, the punk rock crew, and they were they didn't look anything like that. They looked like, what's the word I can use where I don't get in trouble? They didn't have all that elegant beauty. They looked like misfits. There it is. Miscreants. But they still had Marshall amps, Les Pauls, and the album sounded really good. And they all looked, even though they didn't have long hair and high heels on, they all looked cool. So it was just a different way of packaging. But when the Minutemen came along, it was like this next wave of punk rock, which was the true, not that the other ones weren't true, but these guys were not marketable by a major label.
I want to hurt! See, my position was here, and as it was, I was.
Difference between a big label and an independent label? This is probably freedom. We get to do anything we want in an independent label. That's probably why we haven't approached a major label and they haven't approached us, because they probably want to tell us what to do.
They weren't playing Marshall amps. They jammed Econo. They had just, ragtag stuff pieced together, and they got down to the nitty-gritty. So the Minutemen, their songs are all a minute and a half, under 2 minutes long, which is not why they're called the Minutemen, supposedly. Just a kind of a coincidence that they did these songs that were like super quick. It's hard to even tell. I mean, you don't even need any more of the song once they're finished with it. But they have so many of them. So all these Minutemen albums that came out through the years, they're all special. But the one, of course, is Double Nickels on the Dime. It's a double album, and it's got 46 songs on it. Every song is fantastic. And the way they sequence it is even better, because it almost seems like it's like one long song. That sound
So my head is connected to my body.
The way that they sequence it, though, it breaks them up so that you can identify with each individual song and the sentiment, but it also creates this one ginormous double album song out of these 46 parts. It's just the three of them playing straight through. They weren't cutting the drums first and then overdubbing the guitars and vocals. They just did everything at the same time. But to remember 46 songs, even though each song isn't like 5 minutes long, there's a lot of intricate parts going on in there. It's almost like they took a 5-minute song and they scrunched it up into less than 2 minutes. They punch you in the face with it. And then the other beautiful thing that I always notice, Mike and dboon, they just have this crazy love affair, if I may. Not that kind of love affair, but they're like freaking twins, to the point where they're always referencing each other in their own songs. I mean, when you hear Mike Watt talk, he'll be talking about dboon, and he'll say his full name. dboon played guitar when I was, and dboon is sitting right next to him.
Oh, yeah. I met dboon when I was 13. He was 13 also, and dboon has, 8 lines?
Yeah, something like
And
that.
dboon for this.
Who does that? Who talks about one of their friends and says their full name? They're sitting right next to him. And when I met dboon came over to my house, and you can tell just from that, the affection that these two have for each other. And then dboon is singing in the song One Reporter's Opinion. One of the classics of the Minutemen catalog.
What could be romantic to Mike Watt?
He only is a skeleton. The whole song's about Mike Watt. I guess Watt probably. Did he write that? Did he write that? Nobody sitting there? One Reporter's Opinion, the song, is written by a Watt. Mike wrote it about himself, and Dee's singing it. But nonetheless, these two keep referencing each other by their full names, even though they're sitting right next to the other guy. I can't even imagine how devastated Mike Watt was on that day that dboon died. But the top Minutemen songs that are kind of like, there's so many great ones, but One Reporter's Opinion, History Lesson, it's the same thing. It's like the story of the Minutemen sung by the Minutemen while they're still a band. How romantic is that? And who can get away with that?
My band could be your life. Real names be proved. Me and Mike Watt, we played for years. Punk rock changed our lives.
Anybody that's heard Double Nickels has that in their album collection. They know what a masterpiece, what a heavyweight album this is, even though it's on an independent label, SST, never picked up by a major. The SST, they didn't really do that. I mean, the Meat Puppets, they went to a major, but none of the other bands. The Minutemen, after this album came out, they were getting some critical acclaim, but it doesn't seem like their shows were getting that much bigger as far as attendance. Everybody loved them, but it hadn't really like taken off yet, and it was about to, because they went on this tour with REM on the Fables of the Reconstruction tour, which is like a huge album for REM and a huge turning point in REM's career. A guy like Mike Watt, who has spent his whole life doing a van tour. He played with Iggy and the Stooges whenever that was in the early 2000s, and I'm thinking they had a bus. But Mike Watt is a van guy. They're not getting tour buses. And to do a van tour every year until you're however 65 years old, that takes a toll on you. If the Minutemen had gotten to be bigger than they were, how do they avoid all that stuff? Major labels, bus tours, and all the accoutrements. They really weren't cut out for that.
We still don't have a manager or a publicity agent or anything. Like I said, we've never even been approached as far as big labels go. So obviously they know what game we're playing, and we know what game they're playing.
It would have been great to see what they would have done next, of course. Anybody that dies before their time and are an artist, you always wonder, well, what were they about to have done? What was Jimi Hendrix about to do? What was Kurt Cobain about to have done? And probably like the next album is going to be like a big deal, but you don't know what's going to be 5 albums past that, so they're kind of just like frozen in time, where they never had to decide if they were going to give up that little homegrown thing that they came up with in the shed in the backyard through the record industry ringer. After the Minutemen, Mike got married to Kira Rossler, who was the bass player from Black Flag. How cool is that? Think about these two bass icons of the punk rock world. They're in a relationship together and playing music together. They did an album called Dose, where they're just playing bass. It's 2 bass guitars, and they're kind of like jamming with each other, which would become the beginning seeds of Firehose with Ed Crawford, Ed from Ohio. He came from Ohio and found them, tracked them down, Mike and George in San Pedro, and said, I'm the guy. I'm the next guy. And he was. Once Firehose started, the songs that were Dose songs became the music for the Firehose songs. Which is one of the reasons why all the bass lines on the first Firehose album, and on all of them, but especially that one, Raging Full On, the bass lines are just crazy. They're crazy. They're going all over the place. He's got his own style. And I love it that he's just always going for it. Because once you get to a studio and someone's producing you, they're always saying, oh, you might be going too crazy here. Luckily, Mike Watt doesn't listen to anybody telling him to tone it down. He'll do like a little melody thing and then go back down. sounds like an explosion, and then he's back up to a ding 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 ding. Thank you, Mike. I mean, I never got to see the Minutemen. They were done before I was really going to shows. And I had gone to some concerts, but I hadn't been to a club show. But by the time Firehose came around, I was very much going to club shows, and I saw Firehose, I don't know, 50 times, 20 times, 30 times. We were always going to see them. Watt, he was just a beast. They all were. He developed this whole style unto himself, which was kind of like, you know, part funk.
They're very funky.
Mike Watt is like a funk bass player that has a punk rock ethic.
That's my problem. I think joy when reason drugs. American child, children can ruin a good time. I give the time while the soldiers in the street, while I the fold in someone else's country.
He would do this thing, what's that song, Under the Influence of Meat Puppets. He would pull the notes with his left hand, do like a slap and pop kind of thing, but instead of doing it with his right hand, he would do it with his left hand. I don't remember the part. And he would slide up and pull the fucking string. So, excuse my language. And that's why you hear this bass sound is just like a bong. And at the same time, he'd give you that kind of like he's exploding bong. Mike Watt, through the years, holding it down, keeping it true. True to himself, true to you, true to the people, true to the music. He's just a one-of-a-kind dude. My name is Francapitanelli, and I just wanted to talk a little something about Mike Watt. Trying to make a video about something that's out. But anyway, that's all for now, folks. Francapitanelli, totally into the sound. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you next time.